Asked tonight. Dr. Thomas Cauvin is the assistant professor, or is an assistant professor of history at Colorado State University, where he teaches public history and museum studies. He's the president of the International Federation for Public History and has helped make history and heritage more accessible and more exciting and participatory. He was born in France and taught for several years at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, the heart of French-speaking Louisiana, where he worked with various communities through digital collections, museums, audiovisual production. He's the co-producer, along with Michael Espinasse, of Theo's Choice, The Choix de Theo, the film we are about to watch. It's an award-winning documentary that was produced just in 2017, and his film brings to light educators and other activists who have contributed to keeping the French language alive in Louisiana. So with no further ado, let's all welcome Monsieur Thomas Cauvin.
Midwest and on the East Coast, so I hope there's going to be a great start. Just a few words about the film. We'll have a discussion after the film in French or English, it's up to you, about the film, but just a few things about what the film, why this film. First, and who made this film? Because I'm here, but Michael Espinasse was my partner on the film. We're just two. Usually documentary films have 20, 30 people through. We're just two. That gives you an idea of what it is to produce cultural heritage and documentary film in Louisiana. But we've been very helpful because grateful because we've been helped by so many people in Louisiana. That's the thing in Louisiana. You may not have too much money to make a project like this, but everybody wants to help you because everybody has a connection with French heritage. So this film is 51 minutes, more or less. And it's not the typical film about Louisiana in which you see this very nostalgic, romantic view of Louisiana where people, dance, they play music, they eat crawfish. They do, right? Well, everybody knows about that. We wanted to do something a little bit different, and so we decided to work on education and public education in Louisiana. So already you see the challenge. And how and if school can help save a language in Louisiana. Because Louisiana used to be francophone, francophile, but you have less and less people who speak French in Louisiana. So our question is, can school and immersion programs where kids learn and speak French, can this help save a language? Obviously the answer is more complex than yes or no, but that was the idea. The second idea behind this film was not to talk about the big names, like Jacques Richard or all the big names in Louisiana, everybody knows them. We wanted to talk about people like Theo, who's one of the teachers in Louisiana. He's not famous, but he didn't, he was not speaking French at home. He decided to speak French when he was 14. So, anonymous people, but they fight to preserve French in Louisiana. So we wanted to shed light to those people who are usually not under the spotlight. So that was the two main ideas about the film. One last thing maybe is that the DVD was made for TV, so the subtitles may be a bit small. So if you want to read it's French and English, the subtitles are in English. If you do want to read the subtitles, if they're too small, maybe you can come closer. I know it's tough, but that's something I wanted to say. So 51 minutes, then we can discuss about what's different in Minnesota, what's different with other parts of North America, how can we save a language, and how culture can help school. So I hope you will enjoy, and we can talk after the screening. Thank you. French or English?
It was mentioned sort of at the end, like we didn't save the Cajun language, we didn't save the Acadian language. I'm just curious in terms of, this was mostly about preserving French and whatever kind of amalgamation it shows up in, but what did you focus at all when you were doing this on those other kind of Creole or patois versions? Or what can you say about that?
Yes, thank you. No, that's a good question because that helps me to say that we have many French in Louisiana. We have the Cajun French. This is the one we focus about because we're living in Lafayette, which is the heart of the Cajun French heritage, but you have different Creole French languages. which is for me, as a French from France, is slightly more difficult to understand than Cajun. But that's a very powerful, very old language too. And you have people like native tribes who still speak French, the Uma Nation. Brian, I don't know where you are, you know about them. So you have many French languages. So this is one difficulty. What French do you keep? And you also have the French from France who try to impose their grammatical rules and correct you because you don't pronounce it. I know, we tend to do that. So the question is, what French do you preserve? So we decided to work on the Cajun because it was easier for us, and also because Creole did not succeed in becoming a cultural heritage as good as the Cajun did. The Cajun did pretty good in getting political parties or political support or having leaders. It was more difficult for the Creoles for many reasons. So for us, it was more difficult to find people and different levels of French speakers. But you're right about the fact that we mostly deal with the Cajun French. But the situation is pretty much the same. Cajun French is disappearing, as is Creole, and as is the Uma French as well. So it's a common sad statement about those French. But there's still some people who speak French, but as Zoe said, it's a mix of different kind of French. And that's fine, because it's part of people from Quebec who bring their culture about them, they teach their kids, and they teach something about maple syrup, I don't know, from Quebec, oh, that's the cliche, or people from Belgium, so they teach those kids some different things, and those kids, I don't know what French they speak, those kids, because it's a bit of everything, and that's the beauty of it, because it shows you that the language keeps surviving whatever you do. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, that's a variety of French, and they're trying to save something.
How widespread is bilingual education in Louisiana? Are these examples that you showed, how isolated are they, or is it what percentage of the elementary schools would have this bilingual education?
Well, it's a small percentage if you take the state. It's growing every year. So every year you have new classes and new students, so that's a good sign. To give you figures, there are between 5,000 and 6,000 students in immersion programs, which is not a lot, but it's getting better. And that's one of the few states in the US when you have so many immersion schools. You have Utah, you have different states. But Louisiana is getting better. You have French, you have Spanish, you have Chinese, but French is still for different reasons, obviously. So it's widespread, it has a good image, also because it's part of the public schools. And we talk a bit about the challenge of teaching in public schools, in the US, but in Louisiana even more. And immersion programs bring something different, something that other public schools will not have. So that's a change because it's free. Everybody can put their kids. We have some lottery in Lafayette because it's highly popular. But everybody can bring their kids. So that's a plus. That brings also diversity. You may have seen the classroom, this diversity of different kids, and that's something that immersion brings. So you have very good students, you have students with challenges, but they all go and communicate try to communicate in French. So that's something that's very popular. Is it going to be enough? I'm not sure, but that's getting better and better.
Are there any immersion high schools in Lafayette?
There's supposed to be one. I mean, no, there is one. There is
Okay.
one. Yeah.
I know New Orleans, I taught French in New Orleans the last 6 years, and there's a lot of immersion elementary and middle schools, and then the problem is these students come into the mainstream high school French classes, and it's a very different situation for them, and a lot of kids tend to not keep up their French as much.
That's the same in Lafayette. You have one high school, so you can now, you also have bilingual courses since 2017 at the University of Lafayette, so you can go from primary school to college. But very few do that for many reasons. First, because some parents withdraw their kids in the middle school because they want to do STEM or something different, and 5 years of French is not enough. So they move to something more useful. Or the fact that you have less middle schools or only one high school, so you have to send your kid to Lafayette. If you're not from Lafayette, it's difficult. So it's many challenges, but you could if you want. But yeah, I don't have the figures in mind, but you have a lot of loss between the primary school and the middle school. That's usually when the kids stop for different reasons.
Par hasard, connaissez-vous Michel H.
Oui, Michel H. Okay, I gotta answer in English. Michel H. Broussard has been an activist. She's teaching at UL, University of Louisiana. She's been doing a lot about education, because it's not only about French. It's also about why should you learn the language. Why should you put your kids in immersion school or dual education? And you have many debates currently in the US about dual education and immersion schools. And it's becoming very, very popular. It's a very old, education tool. I mean, the Germans were bringing their kids in German school in the late 18th century because they didn't want their kids to lose their German language. So it's very old. But you have a new boost in immersion schools, and Michel has been part of this people who fight for learning a second language. Because figures show that kids who are learning a second language learn better, their mind develops better. It's also a solution to amnesia and Alzheimer, because, I'm not a scientist, so I try to think about it. Knowing different languages provide help fighting memory loss. And so that, in addition to healthy reasons, you have these economic reasons. Why should you put your kids in a French immersion program? Maybe not to save the language, but maybe to get a better job, not to connect with international community. Louisiana is now part of the International Organization for Francophone Countries, which is a big success for Louisiana. So that's a good sign again to show the support of people not only in Lafayette, in Louisiana, but all around the world. And that's been a policy in Louisiana to use the international networks. When the national or the state funding were not that good, then you have the French, the Belgians, the Canadians, the Caribbeans. Caribbeans are very close. And you have many French speakers, Haiti, so you have some exchanges. One difference between Canada and Louisiana, because I'm always asked about the comparison between Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Louisiana, is immigration. Because Nova Scotia, most of the people in the French departments are coming from abroad. You have Africans, you have South Asians. Louisiana, you don't. For obvious reasons, it's very difficult to get visa and to move to the US, especially if you're from West Africa. Canada is slightly different. You have more immigrants, and you have you have different French speakers in Canada and Nova Scotia. That's one difference between Lafayette, Louisiana, where most of the French speakers are either local or, Quebec, French, Belgian. That's limited, right? Very few people from Africa in Lafayette, Louisiana, whereas in, Montreal, Quebec as well, or Sainte Anne, most of the students in Sainte Anne are not Canadians. They're from, Senegal, and they do something about food, and how do you bring French recipes from Senegal, and you use, ingredients from Nova Scotia, and you bring this new meal. Well, that's quite different in Louisiana. You wouldn't have that. So that's the difference. And I don't see the connection with your question, but, Michel has been very important in connecting all those networks. Brian?
I just went with Michel Broussard. One thing that they've done very recently is that they have a master's in immersion that has just been approved, and the cohort is starting this summer.
I saw on Facebook.
Yes, and so that is something that's new in Louisiana, that they're trying to get more local teachers potentially coming down from across the United States or from Louisiana. So it's something that the contemporary side.
Because that's also becoming a job, right?
The money side.
Yeah, immersion schools, and Brian knows a lot because he's been, to Lafayette in Louisiana, and he's bringing his students. He's teaching at the University of Minneapolis, sorry, CSU, right? And is bringing students in Lafayette next March, right? Next March?
Yes, so they're teaching a class this spring on French in Louisiana, so if you have high proficiency in French and are interested, it's a course entirely on Louisiana with a spring break component, traveling to the Lafayette area for a French-speaking trip for a week.
And you can learn to dance the Cajun dance, right?
You should send the info to the Agence about that. We would love to get the word out.
Okay.
Sorry?
Yeah, you talked about the aspects of learning another language on your mental health, like you're fighting Alzheimer's, I think it is, amnesia. I really love the quote about how it also opens you to other worlds, and that's how I've always thought about language and why I keep on trying to learn new ones.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on that too?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love that quote too. I mean, the first level of communication with people, strangers, are languages, right? And if you speak the same language, already you break the barrier with that person, right? So I'm a supporter of learning as many languages as you can, so that you connect with different people who are no longer strangers. So I think that learning languages helps you first to connect with other parts of the world, which is coming from France when you have like 5 or 6 neighbors or countries around, moving to the US when you only have 2, and you're kind of fighting with one, and the other one is the cousin up there, but you don't, it's different. So I think learning different languages help you to see first what's out there, right? And to connect with people, and it's another way of thinking too. When I speak English, when I speak French, I don't think the same way. I don't know if you ever dreamed in a different language, but that's weird because your brain works differently, and it's a good thing, right? You think differently. You start making connection that you didn't do before. So there are many reasons to learn a different language, another language, not only French, or it could be Spanish, Korean, whatever you want, Arabic. That's a general policy that I think could be used for many schools in the U.S. And on that aspect, you're doing much better than the French schools, who do not learn a language until middle school, and when we do learn something. So that's a good point.
What kind of progress are the advocates of French making and enlarging the caucus of Francophone people in the legislature?
Well, the figures are not too good because most of the people who speak French in Louisiana still today are older generations. So you have this gap of people who do not speak French. So you have the older generation, the kids, and in between they don't speak French. So usually you have the kids, so between 5 and 10 they do speak some French. The parents, they don't, and the grandparents do. So you see these kids speaking to their grandparents, and the parents are there and pretending they understand. They're proud because their kids speak to their parents, so that's very nice. And you have this generational discussion, right? That is very impressive. And for example, Zoe Taylor, the Miss Madame Zoe, so she didn't speak French at home. She learned French. And the day of the premiere of the film, she was there, and she brought her grandmother. And after the film, her grandmother spoke to her in French, and she hadn't spoken French to her in 20 years. But because seeing her daughter speaking French and teaching French, she wanted to speak French to her again. And this, the grandmother hadn't spoken French in 20 years. So that's something you have. But again, you have more people dying than people learning French. So the figures are not too good. And it's also a different kind of French. That's why we say in the film that the Cajun language, the Creole language, are endangered. Because the kids, they don't speak the Cajun French that their grandparents do. So the figures are not too good, but you see that a lot of people who are what we call Francophile. They like French. They have this French heritage, even if they don't speak French. So this is a positive note in which people still want to have French immersion. They want to have stores when it's written in French, even if they don't really understand, but that reminds them that they're coming from that, heritage, that family. They don't want to lose that, even if they cannot or do not want to speak French. So figures are not too good, but I will, slightly highlight the Francophile aspect, which is very strong in Louisiana. Much more in Lafayette than in New Orleans. New Orleans is not a French-speaking city. It's even more Creole than Cajun. So New Orleans is very different, but the western part of Louisiana is very Francophile. You have this power. Everything is about, the pride of French people. I don't remember someone. Yeah.
You may have answered my question in part just now, but I was wondering to what extent French has been used as a marketing tool, maybe in politics or in tourism, and has that been like a boon or a barrier to preserving the language?
It's a boon. That's one of the arguments that politicians hear, because it's money. Louisiana being part of the international organization of Francophone countries will help. And that's tourism, that's economic relation. Africa is going to be the French bastion in the next few years. So you have connection with West Africa, the Caribbean. So that's an economic argument that can convince people who are not Francophile. They don't care about French or French heritage, but they hear money, they hear investment, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different argument. So yes, it has become something more practical. It moved from we need to save our roots in the 70s, 80s. Now it's more we need to convince the parents that they need to bring their kids because it's good for the education, for the brain, and they can find jobs in French. Now you have like master in the veterinary studies who sometimes teach other languages, not only to communicate with different populations, but also because it helps in terms of learning, in terms of communication, in terms of marketing. In Colorado, which is not French, it's more about Spanish, the veterinary studies, now they have to speak Spanish in part of the master because it's part of the Spanish veterinary studies. So it's not only about languages, it's more about economy, marketing, and learning. There were two people.
I just was curious, the film indicated that French is an official language in Louisiana. So how does that, what evidence is there that it is an official language?
Well, it's official that you can speak, you can write, but it's not written that it's official, right? It's like English is not the official language in the US. Nothing's written. You have to. I mean, the president could speak Spanish or whatever. I mean, it's not official because you practice. The same in Louisiana. You can present, you can discuss, you can write in French. So that's possible. I don't know if it's often done because of practical reasons, but as Lafayette said, yes, you can. And some people are very, very careful that we should not, they should not lose that right to discuss in French. Because if they lose that, that's the first step of losing it.
So are there translators at the legislature?
Yeah. I mean, because none of
And publications are bilingual or no? Laws would be.
Some of the, I don't think that everything is translated, but some of the laws would be. I don't think that everybody is translated in French because you don't have this mass of people who speak French. It's not like Quebec. You will never impose French as a, well, French is good when it brings something. You will never impose French and make people lose their job or need to take an exam to be civil servants, for example. So as long as French is a positive side, it brings something, that's fine. But if French becomes something that forces other non-French speakers to do things, no. The state will never impose French, in cities and stuff like that. You have names in French, yes, because it's cultural, but politics.
Well, it's more an observation than a question. I'm really intrigued with how, so there's always a big question, is the dying language, are they going to be able to stay education French? And it seems like school is getting in the way, in a way. There's a version of quite a phenomenon because nobody had seen that generation of people speaking French. So I remember the excitement around the French department. But also what I was noticing is that my students, mostly from Haitian backgrounds, Cajun, some Creole, but also some from really isolated places in South Louisiana, they had not spoken English with anybody in their family. And when I was having them read out loud, they were rolling their R's, and I had not told them to. So there was something that had somehow transcribed in them.
Hardwired.
Right, I don't know what it is. So you know what I'm saying? So there's always this question: is it going to survive? Where does it come from? Is it from the teachers? And it feels like I was witnessing something happening that was not using any of that. But anyway, I find it amazing to see people like Zoe, because and people of her generation who were in bands and because I feel like even just so this was almost 20 years ago. I feel like it was
Well, two things. First, music. I'm glad you mentioned music because that, for a long time, that was the way that people could learn French, right? And practice French. Even if they didn't learn French at school, they were singing in French because of the Cajun, the Zydeco or the Cajun music. So music for a long time has been the only way for you to practice, to hear, or to learn French. It's still the case, and I think that's one of the things about the film. We say that schools by itself cannot succeed. School has to be connected to food, restaurants, music, yoga courses that they do in Arnaudville. When you would be in Arnaudville, you can do yoga in French, Brian, if you want. So to make French alive, right? If you keep French in schools, you can have like my English when I was learning English in school. I learned English in Irish pubs. That's where you learn, right? The same for French. You don't learn French in school. You learn the basic and then you practice. So it has to be connected to music, film, everything. And the second question is about where does that come from? So you have the teachers, but you have the grandparents, you have TV, now you have TV Louisiane, right? Or TFO. You have some channels in French, even though it's nothing compared to the internet and so on. So you have different vectors, and that's the solution of the beauty, whatever you call it, to have different origins and different ways to learn French. If it's only school, and Zoe learned because her grandmother was speaking French. For her, she wanted to. She didn't speak when she was not born in a French family. Theo either. So they learn. They make the choice to learn, and that's very important. If you're not committed, if you don't want to, well, in Louisiana, you're not going to practice.
There have been systematic attempts to record the local dialects.
Oh yeah, since like in the U.S. from the 1930s, anthropology, folklore, Barry Ancelet was very famous for recording hours of. And if you want, I can send you the link for a documentary online, free, about the different accent, the Creole from. And sometimes you have different villages. One small village, they speak one way Creole. The other village is like half a mile. They speak a different French. And they know where they're from because of the words they use or the accent. So I'm not good enough at Cajun Creole to distinguish, but it's very specific, especially in the countryside. In big cities, Lafayette is not a big city, but you tend to lose those differences. But in the countryside, again, Brian, you can have fun. Very different villages and different families. The Guidry, we were talking of the Guidry, the Hébert, the Broussard. Some of them speak a very different French, and again, that's quite a thing.
Do you know the website by the Canadian Jacques Leclerc, Aménagement linguistique dans le monde? If you're interested in questions of the political status, legislation. This is an incredible website. It actually deals with French throughout the world. And there's a whole subset about Louisiana, and I'm sure it gives the history of the linguistic legislation and so on. It's called Aménagement linguistique dans le monde.
Another thing you could do, and I forgot to mention then, the Codofil, so the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana, which is a state institution, and I'm grateful because they are funding the tour, but also because they've been fighting for preserving French in 1968. They celebrated their 50th anniversary last year, and they brought back people who were teaching in the 1970s. I met this couple from northern France. Interviewed them. They were the first part of the first teacher who moved to New Orleans in 1971, 2 weeks after their honeymoon. So they get married to get a visa, and they move to New Orleans, and they spend a few years there, and that's still part of their, history, right? And they still meet with the teachers that came with them in 1971, so it's like 40, 47 years ago. But they went back to Lafayette and they met with other people, so it sticks to you. We're talking about, if you go to Louisiana, it's very different. You may not like the humidity, the heat, the mosquitoes, and all that, but yeah, the cockroaches, yes, and hurricane and so on. But there is something that you don't really get anywhere, especially if you go to the countryside. You have these values, you have this heritage, which you always remember that, and that's something very beautiful about Louisiana.
I just want to do one other plug that for in April, if you're not able to go to Louisiana, April 18th, we're having a poet, a Louisiana French poet, coming to campus, Kirby Jambon, who is recognized by the Académie Française for his poetry, will be in town, and he's actually a 5th grade French immersion teacher, so it connects well from the movie. He's in there just a small scene, but he will be actually here in the Twin Cities on April 18th, so that will be on the University of Minnesota's website, Department of French.
Which has the great merit to speak Cajun, to teach Cajun, and to be recognized by the Académie Française, which is, from the French. It's showing how the French changed their way of dealing with their cousin. There was a question, yeah.
With the standardized testing in English, do the students need to be trained to take tests in English after learning everything in French?
Yeah,
is there anything they do better on those tests?
Tests are traumatic for me and Michael, because I was not teaching those kids, but my wife was, and if you're a 2nd grader, you have to spend 3 hours in front of a computer. You cannot leave the room for 3 hours. That's what I did in college, right? They have to do that morning and afternoon, no recess, right, for 1 week. That's the extent of the trauma of testing. So it's not about French immersion, but that's about when you have people from Belgium, Quebec, Senegal, France coming and say, you're going to have to teach that. Yeah, but that's more important. No, it's not in the text. So that's a shock also, coming from different, learning, pedagogy. So test is not helping. We're not against tests, but there's a discussion to have about tests in Louisiana and about the extent of testing, and especially in a French immersion or immersion program when language is important. And you don't test, French or languages in doing those tests. So you have a discrepancy between what you want to do to teach a language and testing, which is standardized all around Louisiana. So it's the same question. So that's right. And Michael wanted to have much more about that. Well, people don't want to know about too much.
You might expect them to do better on grammar and math because those both involve the same type of language.
Yeah, those kids do better. Immersion kids do better in everything. It's not, they do better. It's also because parents are usually more involved when they put their kids in immersion. That's a sign that, I want to follow my kid, I want to help my kids. So they do better, the kids do better, but it's also because the parents do obviously better. So
if I can ask something a little more personal, I'm curious to know how you came to your interest in Louisiana, Louisiana French.
My job. I got a job.
Your field is history?
Yeah, I got a job because I'm teaching public history. Public history is a way of doing history with the public, so it's exhibition, film, so it's a way of doing history. So when you do public history, you talk to people and say, what's your history? Let's work together. What do you want to do? And I had so many people saying, well, I'd like you to record my mom because she's 95, she speaks French, and I want to preserve her memories. So, well, maybe we could do something about helping those people to preserve their memories. It's be done about music, food, want to do something different. My wife teaches immersion school, so let's have this history, public participation in school, and let's do something together. And I was running with Michael, said, well, let's make a film. We had no money. Documentary film is about $50,000. We got $2,500 altogether. We didn't have a camera, so nobody to transcribe the subtitles. I always see mistakes. So it was. I would do it differently, but it was our first film, so we did with what we had, and so.
Who was doing the filming?
Both Michael and I. Filming, editing. Michael did most of the editing. He did a great job. So yeah, it was only two of us for the music. Just to give you an idea, archives. All footing. Moving images. Do you know the price of 1 second? 1 second of archives. Between $43 and $45. 1 second. The first idea we wanted to have CNN on the Bush and the no China left here. Half a minute was about $3,000. We had 500. No way. So making films it's a market. It's becoming a market because it's very expensive. So we were lucky to talk to people, to have interviews with people, to have private archives, to be helped by LPB, which is a Louisiana Public Broadcasting. But that's a lot of work. So we're just lucky to be helped by so many people.
Are you selling the DVD or anything?
We are selling to people who ask.
Okay.
It's not on YouTube yet, because if it's on YouTube, then you have some difficulty to put them in festivals, because film festivals do not want YouTube film. So we cannot sell it to people who ask, but it's not on Amazon, it's not, because it's, so if you want it, you can check we have a Facebook page, which is Choix de Theo. It's also on the Agence Française website, so you can contact us for that, or I can give you my card. But it's where you see it's not a business. It's a very amateur film, and we send it to schools. We send it to Agence Française, to kids. We got a message, a very touching message from this high school kid from a school where they drop French classes. They say, well, I've heard about your film. Can I show the film to the parents and to convince the parents that we should have French in the high school? So obviously we send a DVD, and we're just happy to help her. But that's the reason why we did the film, not to help people realize that learning the language and helping French, preserving French in Louisiana or Minneapolis is important, because it's not only about French, it's about the language, it's about discovering your roots. So the answer is yes, we do if people ask.
She's a high school teacher, so at my old high school, actually.
I just wanted to say, so I'm actually from where you filmed the documentary.
Lafayette?
Right around there, just south.
You can be accurate.
New Iberia? I was going to say
Nouvelle-Iberie. Yeah. The American historian who says that, he talks a lot about the cadiens,
the stories in the film are a lot like mine.
Yeah.
Yes, just like mine. All four of my grandparents spoke French, their first language. And then, for whatever reason, my parents didn't speak it. And then whenever I was growing up, I learned a lot from them. So I made it a point to like speak with them whenever I visit, because anytime we visited their house, they spoke in French. That was their first language. So, je parle français, mais petit peu difficile pour moi.
Mais c'est important. And that's one of the sad things when I said that you have this gap in your parents, they don't speak French.
I think another thing that had to do with it was the French or the Cajuns aren't the only people who live there. You know, you have English and German and Italian and all kinds of other people. So when you're out and about, things are in English. But whenever I was a kid growing up, I saw French everywhere. People spoke French. Every day I heard French. Menus of stores were in.
That sticks, right?
We go next door, we go to the épicerie, which is like the grocery store right next door to our house.
That's what they're trying to prepare. I mean, the names of the stores and some French in the stores menu. But to go back to your parents or this generation, sometimes it was your grandparents who didn't want to speak French to their kids. The reason was that they had been beaten at school, they had been discriminated at school, they didn't want their kids to suffer the same trauma.
They told us they had to kneel on rice and then write notes on the chalkboard.
So what do you do when you experience that? You don't want your kids to experience the same, so you speak English to them. You don't want them to speak French. And that this lack of discrimination, and that changed. Now people are going back to being proud of being French or speaking French, but for a long time they didn't speak French to their kids. They didn't want their kids to be beaten at school. So that's sad. And we have a lot of emotions. When we interview people, all generation remember that. That's traumatic, but also the grandkids who know about that. And they know that their parents do not speak French because of the trauma of their parents. So you have a lot of family issues too. Trauma and very sad moments. So it's not only about French, it's about being beaten at school. And again, it's not only French. When the French colonized Africa, the first thing they did is to impose French and to remove Wolof in Senegal. So French is not always the victim. French people have been the colonizers and have imposed their. It's about power. So that's something that Senegalese friend of mine reminded me that, well, that's true, but I've been the other way around too. So yeah, that's a very sad story.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say, so like in some of, growing up I heard words and phrases, but then later I'm learning French from France, and some of the words and phrases are different.
Yeah. And there's no right or wrong. I mean,
but people understand, like if it's raining, down in Louisiana we say ça fait mouiller. It's raining.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and different places, different accent, different words,
And also, I noticed your last name. Do you pronounce it Cauvin?
Yeah, it's not Chauvin.
Chauvin. It's very similar.
Oh yeah, every time people want to add an H to my name, I have to say Chauvin.
I wonder if there's not some kind of connection, like maybe it's just...
No, it comes from Calvin. Cauvin and Calvin are the same origin. Chauvin is a different part of the family names.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, always people in Louisiana want to. Are you sure? Are you sure? Pretty sure, yes. Yes, Chauvin is very popular in Lafayette. Oh, Louisiana.
La dernière chose, j'ai vu ma cousine sur le film.
When was that?
Une étudiante avec le chanteur Zachary Richard.
When he chante l'espoir.
That was it, right?
She's a Landry, Haley Landry. She was taller and she had glasses.
Very popular Landry, yeah.
Faut t'acheter le résumé.
With this film, I was wondering if you find
That's a good question. It depends what immigration you're talking about. If you're talking about Korean coming to the U.S. working, Apple or HP, they would preserve their language at home, so they would speak Korean. Spanish is more ambiguous. Sometimes they preserve French, Spanish, but sometimes they don't want their kids to speak Spanish. So you have the whole reflex of, I want my kids to speak English to get a better job. But I tend to feel that it's getting better, and parents, there's no shame speaking your language at home. I force my kids to speak French at home. For some reason, if you don't speak your language at home, you're going to lose it, even if you go to immersion. So I'm supportive of, telling parents you should speak your language to your kids. They're going to learn English anyway. I mean, they have TV, they have friends. Well, my kids speak English way better than I do. So, and we speak French at home. So that's. So I think I think it might be easier today to raise your kids in your language than it was like 50 years ago. Although, again, it depends what kind of immigration, right? Some people would feel prouder of, being, high-tech Korean, and for some people it's because the way people look at Spanish is very different than people look at German or French. French is a fancy, elite language. Spanish would be, not so good, especially in that context. So it depends what language you're talking about. Thank you very much for coming. I will stick around, so if you have other questions, I have emails if you want a DVD. But thank you for coming in for your question. It was very, very lively. Thank you.